So here we go, guys. We've got our base coats down. We're ready to wash our models. So grab your brush and your wash and let's get down to the painting table and let's start washing and shading those models. Alright, so here we are, guys. We're going to be washing this Space Marine we painted in the last video. So what do I mean by washing? So it's by using a series of specialized shade paints, commonly known as washes, to create depth in the recesses of the models. So as you can see right now, we have something that looks like it's come out of a kid's toy section. Very simple, very basic. I mean, it gets the idea there. But what we're going to do now, this next step just emphasizes that idea and brings some of those details back in and makes them more obvious to the eye. So first things first, we don't need this palette this week at all. So here I've got my wet palette. Now, they're a handy tool and a handy investment. But for doing washes and that, you simply just can't use one of these. So, I'll put the lid on it and we'll throw it off to the side. And what we'll do, I've actually got another palette over here that I'll bring in. So this is just a weld artist palette. Cost me a couple of bucks at just a cheap $2 shop, or I don't know what you Americans call them, but $2 shop. The reason I like this, it's fairly deep. You can get a lot of material out in the wells. And then as you can see, you've got plenty of wells around the side there to be able to work from. You can also use this for other things. Now, if you don't own a wet palette and you own one of these to do all your painting, that's fine. There's a couple of different types. If I bring over another one here, this is more of an artist style palette where it's got lots of deep wells in that. I mean, before I had a wet palette, this was my go-to palette just because I could mix my mixes up fairly wet and make them last longer in this Australian climate. So do yourself a favour and grab a deep well, even if it's only for doing your washes. Alright, so there's a few little tips and tricks here that I'm going to show you. There's a couple of different ways of washing that we're going to cover tonight as well. So first things first, we'll bring our model in, and I'm actually going to start focusing on the red. Now this might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but my reasons will become clear in a moment. So we'll do this red, we'll do this brown while we're at it, and then we can start looking at our next steps. So to do the red, we've got Agrax Earthshade. This is a pretty good colour. I mean, there's a few colours you could choose from, but this one's pretty common. I've got myself a decent brush, and just like applying paints, we're going to bring it out. Now, I don't have too much to do, so I'll just grab 3 brush loads out for now. And then what we'll do, we'll just add a bit of water to it, like we would with our normal paint. You don't use paint straight out of the pot, and the same should apply for your washes. They need just a little bit of water just to help break down that surface tension. So what we're going to do, we're going to focus on this red area. We'll bring our wash in, and as you can see, straight away, that has already changed the model dramatically before it's even dried. So we'll just put a thin layer of this on, and what we want to do, we want to avoid what's called pooling. So what do I mean by pooling? Pooling is where you put too much paint on and allow it to run like that. What we want to do, we want a nice even coverage on there. If you find you have too much on there, that's okay. Just wipe some off your brush, or alternatively, wash your brush out and start again. If you find you have too much wash on the model, you can wash your brush out, like I'm about to here, and wick away some of the excess wash, just like that. Now, The smoother you go applying this stuff, the less marks and coffee staining and a like you get in your finish. So you want to try and, where possible, run from point to point on this. So we've finished that chainsword. That's got a nice little shade in there. It's not too over the top. We'll go on to this bolter casing here. See how I've applied a bit. I feel like it's a bit too heavy and it might just cover the whole lot. So I've taken some off my brush, just using the edge of my palette, and now I'm just moving that paint in as smooth a brush strokes as I can around the areas that I'm currently washing. Where you've got smaller areas like this, just take your time. Nice and easy. We'll focus on the underside now and do the same thing there. And finally, we can come into this side. Now this is where your washes will catch a lot. Sometimes it may be worth just going with the grain of the recess rather than trying to fight against it. And it may come out and give you a better finish. So we've done the bolt gun and the chainsword. I'm going to go around and quickly belt in these couple of pouches now, and we'll come back to you in a second and move on to the next shade that we're going to use. So we've done our red and brown washes using our Agrax Earth shade. We're now going to bring in another colour, and that is known oil. So as you saw there, make sure you give them a really good shake before you bring them over to use your washes. I'm actually going to put this in the well next to it, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a couple of separate washes here out of this colour alone, and then I'll show you how we can mix the two together to create a different look altogether. So first things first, all I want to use this for is just these metal vents on the back of the Space Marine's backpack. Just any plain metal on the Space Marine itself, I will do with my pure black. So this will create one tone of metal on our miniature. Same as before, just go fairly lightly, fairly easily, and try and be fairly neat with this stuff. If you get it over the edge, it's not that big of a deal. It's not the end of the world. We can wash it off with water, as with any paint that we use. But let's try and keep it as simple as we can. So what we're actually going to do now is we're actually going to start mixing these two together. So take a couple of brush loads of each. Just swap between these two palettes like this. If you were just creating this one colour, I would say just put a dollop or a brush load of your black and a brush load of your brown. You can also use this to change the tone. So you could mix it in different ratios and such like that to try and create a different tone. And what I'm going to do, everything that's metal on here that isn't on that backpack, so all these canisters around the pouches, will go on to the weapons. This is a really good tone for the weapons, and it just breaks it up from any other metal that you have already on your model and creates that dirtier, grimier, used look rather than just a simple black or brown can on its own. So we'll go around in much the same method and just liberally apply that, let it run into the recesses, try not to let it pull. If it does pull, just wick it away, just keep moving it round. This stuff's going to settle where it wants to settle, but it can stain the surfaces of these colours as well, so we just have to be careful, that way we're not altering our tones on the rest of the model. So we've only got one little bit left here, this barrel, and we can move on to the chainsword, get that done, and move on to the next step. Alright, so we've got our red wash and our metal wash now done. We're going to move on to a little bit more challenging ways of washing miniatures. So firstly, we'll go with the yellow. Now, I've swapped to a slightly smaller brush and I'm using a different well again just to get this yellow out. I don't need much. I don't have a massive area of this to paint. So just give that a good mix with some water. Now, first things first, I'm going to unload my brush by going all over our chest eagle here. This is really going to settle into those recesses and make that chest eagle pop. So this is the same method as we've been doing on our other parts of our models. Now we'll focus over onto this shoulder pad. So this one has a bit of a lip that we can get some of that shade into and get a wash in. And we'll just lightly run over the top. So when you're doing this is very similar to a technique called glazing, where we're not actually trying to change or add depth to details while we're doing it this way. All we are doing is trying to change the tone of that yellow so that it matches these areas here, like where I'm washing now. That way it's just a nice uniform yellow right around the model and it really enriches that colour. So what we'll do on this side, we've got nothing to worry about in terms of a recess to wash into. So we'll just go over it now, just very lightly. You'll only need a small amount of paint and just work it across the flap and glaze this in. And once this is done, we're going to leave this to dry because our next step is going to be a blue wash over the remaining parts of the model. But we don't want the yellow and the blue mixing and turning our wash green. So just set it aside for 10 minutes or so and we will come back once it is dry. So we're now up to our final wash for this model, and this may be the most difficult way to apply a wash, but in the long run it saves you a lot of time and still emphasizes the points you're trying to make by completing this step. So here I've got some Drakenhof Nightshade, which is a very dark blue wash. I'm going to want a fair bit of this stuff out because I'm going to be covering all of that blue area. So I'll just put maybe one and a bit brush loads of water in there. I want it to release off the brush quite easily, but I also want to be able to have control with this. So what we'll do, we'll pick an area that's nice and easy. We'll start off with this arm here. And what we're going to do, this is what they call lining in the recesses, a recess wash, a pin wash. We're just going to take our brush. I've got here a 3-0 brush, which is a very fine brush. And we're just going to literally paint this wash into these recesses and avoid the flats. So it'll just leave a nice deep band, as you can see in there, without staining the rest of the surface. Now on a model like a Space Marine, this is handy. You'll have other different places where it will be useful, but majority of the time you're just going to be creating a full-blown wash and just washing the whole piece. I don't want to go through the hassles of having to relayer over this, because this is a very dark color, like I said. I just want to emphasize the different shades that are there, and just draw your attention to those areas and make it not look flat. So just a little bit on the tip of your brush at a time, and just slowly paint those recesses in. And you can already see how much of a difference that has made in comparison to the rest of the model. So in these deeper areas, maybe there's a bit more texture on it, like in here where we have this banding. I'll come up either side I'll apply my washes in there, and then to emphasize that banding, I'll just quickly run across, following those grooves down that banding. That's going to give us another tone again. So we're going to have the darker area on here with just the shade recesses around the edge. And then we'll position our model and turn our model around so we can see what we're doing. And just fine line into there. And see how beautifully that's releasing from the brush. It's not taking a lot of effort to get it off. Couple of quick passes, and you've gotten a nice recess wash. I'll go all around where these different objects meet the blue, just to help emphasize that joining point of the different textures. Don't be afraid to use your fingers either. You can use your thumbnails, your fingernails, the backs of your fingers, this area of your hand as well. They make a really good palette, especially if you only want to make minor adjustments to your paint, to the amount that's on your brush, things like that. So what I'll do, I'll go through and I'll quickly line all this in and give it a recess wash, and then we'll come back when it's done and when it's dry and have a look at how it comes out when it's dry. It'll take about 10 minutes or so for this stuff to properly dry. So let's get that done now, and I'll come back and we'll have a look in a sec. So there you go, guys. We've now finished our washes on our models. We've looked at a few techniques. We've done it a few different ways on this model, and as you can see, this is looking ridgy-dig fantastic now. I'll chuck a couple of stills up straight after this, and what we'll do, we'll jump up and have a bit of a chat about the importance of washing and what the next steps are from here. So there you go, guys. Just a couple of techniques there. So we've got our all over wash. Then we've got our ability to mix our washes and make basically our own tones or our own depths of shade in there. We've then gone in and done another all over wash on that yellow, but followed it up with a glaze. So we've used the wash to just lightly tint the colour underneath. And then finally we've actually gone through and given our recess wash, or our pin wash, whatever you guys would like to call it. As you can see, it can take a bit of effort to go through and do your recess wash, and it can take a bit of time. I think that whole model doing the blue took me about 15 minutes. But when you put it into context that we've done all that base coat work, we've then washed our model, and then if you're doing all over wash, you have to come back in again and relayer that model. This time you can't do it the same way you did with your base coat. You've actually got to panel each model, or each part of the model out. So it takes a bit longer, and you just got to weigh up those options of what method of washing you want to use, as well as what mixes of washes, what colours, what brands. I mean, everyone's got their own washes from Citadel, Vallejo, Army Painter. So pick what's right for you, pick what's right for your model, and pick what's right for your tones. Now, that was on a Space Marine. There's different types of washes that you can use for, you know, organic cloaks and armor and that sort of stuff. I haven't gone into going technical about there being just your standards and your glosses and that sort of stuff. They're a bit more advanced techniques, and this series really is about getting your models on the tabletop. And speaking of that, by doing the base coat and the wash, you've actually achieved a battle ready model. That's right, you have achieved a minimum legal standard to attend an event, to go in and play in a store with painted models, to even play with at your mate's house. You've literally just nailed it. So you've achieved your first step along this painting journey. We'll come back next week, and what we'll do, we've got our base. What we'll do now is look at some layering and highlighting and lifting those colours a bit more, lifting the effect and creating a bit more of a eye-catching piece that you'd be proud to put on your shelf. For now, let's just stick with the basics, and let's get your army on the tabletop. Let's get them battlefield ready, and then when you're ready in your time, come back and we'll have the video there next week that you can watch on layering and highlighting. Till then, hope you guys have a good one, and we'll catch you all next week.